A few days later, during dinner with his family, Farah mentions that Evan's son has gone off to train in Bria. Curious, Arrol asks what Bria is, and his mother explains that it's known as the City of Swords. She also reveals that she once trained at a guild there before settling down. Hearing this, Arrol becomes eager to one day travel there and unlock his true potential as a classless hero. 5 years pass, and an older Arrol finally sets off for Brea City in a carriage. While traveling through a forest, the driver informs the passengers that they'll soon arrive in Brasta after climbing a hill. A woman on board strikes up conversation, asking if everyone is headed for the same destination. A barbarian swordsman replies harshly, annoyed at her. When she asks why he's so rude, he insults her skimpy outfit. The woman retorts that wearing less is practical for her dual swordsman style. Their argument escalates until the driver comments on the power of their advanced classes. Suddenly, the carriage halts as a band of wild orcs blocks the path. The driver urges the two swordsmen to prove themselves, but both lose their bravado and panic when the Orc King emerges. As fear spreads, a commoner woman clings to a boy for safety, but he shoves her aside and flees. Soon after, she and even the driver run as well. In contrast, Arrol calmly steps forward and charges into the horde. He unleashes his blink dash skill, shocking the driver, though it seems impossible for him to escape the overwhelming numbers. But then Arrol spins into a whirlwind, cutting down the orcs in a blade dance. The driver is stunned, recognizing the move as the iconic technique of the legendary Sword Princess, a class traditionally reserved for women. In the battle's climax, Arrol dodges the Orc King's massive strike, leaps overhead, and drives his blade deep into its skull, dropping the beast instantly. Returning to the carriage, he asks the shaken driver to continue toward Brea. When Arrol says he seeks greater strength there, the driver points out he already seems absurdly powerful. A curious boy on board asks Arrol's class, and he surprises everyone by saying he has none. It is revealed that years earlier, Arrol showed his mother the twin slice skill he had learned from a red-haired fighter. Though at first she thought she imagined it, he explained that he was able to acquire skills without belonging to any class. He then asked her to pass on the Sword Princess techniques before he eventually traveled to Brea for advanced training. Proud of his gift, his mother began boasting about him to the rest of the family. Arrol's memory ends as the driver wakes him upon arrival in Brasta. Stepping out, he immediately senses the aura of numerous skilled swordsmen. He questions the driver about his class, but the man downplays himself as an ordinary person. Arrol calls him out, noting how easily he identified sword techniques earlier. Pressured, the driver admits he is actually a high-ranking holy knight. When Arrol asks why such a warrior would work as a carriage driver, the man explains that he sometimes takes breaks from battle by living as a commoner. Arrol agrees with the driver's advice, realizing that even heroes need rest. The driver then recommends he begin his journey by joining a sword guild, explaining that the city often hosts tournaments where he can earn both money and reputation. However, he reminds Arrol that without guild membership, participation isn't possible. Excited by the thought of facing strong challengers, Arrol accepts the plan. Before leaving, the driver cautions him about shady guilds that prey on rookies. After parting ways, Arrol heads deeper into the bustling city. He spots the Calvar's Guild recruiting knight-type swordsmen, along with other guilds open to anyone. Suddenly, a girl rushes toward him, attempting to embrace him, but he instinctively sidesteps without even looking. Stunned, she realizes his awareness must be extraordinary. Curious about him, she quickly asks if he's looking to join a guild. When Arrol nods, she launches into an enthusiastic pitch for her newly founded guild. She even shows him a contract, but Arrol brushes her off. Not giving up, she clings to his belt, asking why he's leaving. Arrol bluntly replies that she seems desperate, making her guild look weak. He assumes she's pretending to be from a famous guild just to lure in members. Introducing herself as Lilia, she changes tactics, promising him a date if he joins. Arrol flatly rejects her, comparing her behavior to his older sisters and mocking her childish figure. Offended, Lilia tries to keep her composure, as Arrol asks instead about the city's strongest guild. Grinding her teeth, she tells him about Black Blade, the top guild boasting 8 A-ranked swordsmen. Intrigued, Arrol heads to their grand headquarters. A guard stops him and explains that he must pass a test to join. After waiting his turn, the receptionist informs him that only advanced classes are accepted. When Arrol admits he's classless, the man bursts into laughter and orders him to leave. Other swordsmen nearby whisper and sneer, but Arrol insists he's confident and asks to be tested. The receptionist, unmoved, refuses to bend the rules. Just then, several high-ranked swordsmen enter, stealing the attention of everyone in the hall. Realizing the futility, Arrol decides to leave. He visits other guilds, only to face the same rejection. None will even let him attempt their entrance exams. Discouraged, he recalls the sealed letter of recommendation his mother gave him, a backup plan he once dismissed as overprotective. Now he understands she foresaw these obstacles. Deciding to honor her wishes, he heads toward her old guild. On his way, Lilia intercepts him again, pleading for him to join her guild. Arrol ignores her, but she continues begging, even humiliating herself by offering to lick his boots. Onlookers stare in disgust as Arrol walks away, while Lilia, undeterred, vows to keep trying. Eventually, she catches up again and gestures toward a massive guild hall, insisting he's welcome there. Surprised by the size of the building, Arrol questions why her guild is in such poor shape. Lilia admits they've fallen from their former glory, but swears she'll revive them. She reveals that this guild, the Dragon Fang, was once led by the famed Dual Swords King. Arrol suddenly remembers that his mother once trained there as well. This connection convinces him to at least take a look. Lilia happily leads him inside, where she sets him down to wait. Suddenly, her drunk father stumbles out from behind a sofa, earning Lilia's furious scolding. Lilia scolds her father, reminding him that the doctor forbade him from drinking and that they can't even afford alcohol. But he brushes her off, and Arrol suddenly realizes the man is none other than the former Dual Swords King. Noticing his missing arm, Arrol listens as the man bitterly declares the guild finished and tells him to leave. Ignoring Lilia's protests, he storms out. Lilia explains that her father was once among Bria's greatest swordsmen until he lost his arm and career. Assuming this will drive Arrol away, she's stunned when he chooses to stay. Arrol explains that every other guild has already turned him down, so joining here is his only chance. Overjoyed, Lilia presents the contract, which Arrol signs. But when she discovers he is classless, her excitement turns to disbelief. At first, she suspects a joke, but after seeing his certificate, she reacts furiously. Drawing her sword, she threatens to kill him on the spot, insisting her guild needs real swordsmen, not a classless nobody. Still stung by the humiliation he caused her earlier, Lilia grows angrier. But at that moment, a woman named Rhiannon enters. Lilia immediately seeks comfort in her arms, accusing Arrol of trying to scam her. Recognizing him, Rhiannon explains that they are from the same hometown. Though Arrol is confused, she reminds him of sparring together as children, then again 5 years ago. He struggles to recall until he finally remembers battling a red-haired boy. Blushing, Rhiannon reveals that she was that boy. In truth, Captain Evans's only daughter. Embarrassed, Arrol apologizes for not realizing sooner. As she awkwardly wonders if it's her longer hair that made him forget, he glances at her figure, making her blush deeper. Lilia then confirms that he is the same classless fighter who once beat Rhiannon. Determined not to lose again, Rhiannon declares a rematch. The three head to the guild's training grounds, where Lilia volunteers as referee. She's still baffled that Rhiannon would waste time on someone without a class, but Rhiannon insists Arrol is strong and deserves a serious fight. The match begins, and Rhiannon launches a twin slice attack. Arrol tries to counter, but her blades cut through and land cleanly. Shocked, he realizes something has changed. Rhiannon tosses down her weapon, revealing it to be 5 times heavier than a normal sword. With her brute swordsman class enhancing her power, his old counters won't work anymore. As her relentless strikes continue, Arrol struggles to hold his ground. Admitting she's grown immensely, he knows he'll lose if he keeps fighting her head-on. Surprised that she's openly revealing her strengths, he asks why. Rhiannon replies that defeating him is worth showing her hand. Smirking, Arrol warns that despite her power, she still lacks the speed to land a decisive blow. With fierce determination, Rhiannon charges straight at him, ready to prove him wrong. Rihanna parries Arrol's blade and slashes toward his body, only for him to vanish, leaving behind nothing but an afterimage. To her shock, he reappears behind her and lands a strike at her neck. Confused, she asks how he avoided her attack, but Arrol explains calmly that what she struck was merely a shadow. Realizing he's using a supreme swordsman technique, Rihanna is stunned. She launches another flurry of attacks, but Arrol effortlessly evades each one, claiming the technique is as simple as moving quickly. Insulted by his casual explanation, Rihanna presses harder, only for him to remind her that mastering such skill actually took years of effort. He then vanishes again, striking her with another clean blow, yet notices it does no damage. Smirking, Rihanna reveals that her brute swordsman class boosts her defense, giving her a protective barrier. Undeterred, Arrol sidesteps her next assault and delivers a flawless counterstrike. He explains that it's a technique he learned from his mother, and with that, Rihanna collapses in defeat. Lilia, stunned by the display, declares Arrol the winner. Frustrated, Rihanna laments her loss despite all her training, but Arrol praises her growth and admits she's strong, just not as strong as him. Overwhelmed, Rihanna bursts into tears. Lilia rushes to comfort her, furious that Arrol made her cry. Bewildered, he insists he only meant to compliment her, but Rihanna denies her tears and retreats to the guild. Moments later, both he and Lilia overhear her sobbing loudly about losing despite training for 5 years. After the duel, Lilia officially welcomes Arrol into Dragonfang. Though he notices her attitude has completely shifted, she pretends she always believed in his strength. When Arrol asks why the guild is in such poor condition, Lilia hesitates before admitting they are heavily in debt. Curious, he presses her, and she whispers the massive number into his ear. She explains that they could pay it off if they win the upcoming city tournament. The problem, she needs at least 3 members to compete. Arrol then asks why Rihanna, who is clearly talented, would stick with their struggling guild. Lilia reveals that when Rihanna first arrived in Bria, she too was rejected by the top guilds. However, Lilia's father saw her potential and welcomed her into Dragonfang. Touched by the loyalty, Arrol nods in understanding. Though Lilia worries about facing enemy teams with up to 5 members, Arrol feels only excitement, eager to test himself against stronger opponents. Declaring that fighting powerful enemies is why he came to Brea, he accepts the challenge with enthusiasm. Secretly observing, the Guildmaster takes note of Arrol's incredible potential. Thus ends the 2nd episode. The following morning, Arrol wakes up in an unfamiliar room before remembering that he's now staying at the Dragonfang Guild. Stepping out, he spots Lilia and Rihanna already seated at the table and greets them. Lilia smiles and asks if he slept well, and Arrol replies that it's been a long time since he's had such a comfortable rest. He notices, however, that Rihanna hasn't said a word and figures she's still sulking over losing their previous fight. Before he can dwell on it, Lilia breaks the silence with some exciting news. The Dragonfang Guild is finally qualified to enter the upcoming guild tournament. Beaming with enthusiasm, she announces that they're officially registered and ready to compete. Curious, Arrol asks if winning the prize money would be enough to pay off their guild's debts. Lilia nods and begins explaining the rules. Victory goes to the last guild standing, meaning they must eliminate all opposing members to win. Rihanna looks uneasy, worrying about the challenges they'll face since they're at a disadvantage in numbers. But Lilia stays optimistic. She believes it's unlikely they'll face too many high-ranked swordsmen and proudly points out that Dragonfang has 2 B-ranked fighters of their own. Arrol, looking puzzled, asks what those rankings mean. With a smirk, Rihanna mocks him for his ignorance, while Lilia kindly explains that swordsmen are ranked from D up to A, depending on their power. She adds that there are only about 20 ranked swordsmen in the entire kingdom of Brea, and both she and Rihanna are among the B ranks. Despite Arrol's victory over Rihanna, Lilia doesn't believe he's a ranked fighter yet, considering how massive the gap is between their levels. Suddenly, Lilia remembers that the tournament matchups are about to be announced and hurries off to check them. Once she leaves, Rihanna stands up as well, preparing to train. Arrol, intrigued, asks if she truly specializes as a power bladesman and whether she has any secondary skills. She explains her unique ability, Guts, which strengthens her defensive barrier. Interested, Arrol grabs her hands. causing Rihanna to blush and misinterpret his intentions. But he quickly clarifies that he wants her to help him learn the guts ability. She looks at him confused, as he insists that the best way to master endurance is by taking repeated hits. Rihanna reminds him that her skills are divine blessings from the goddess, not something others can just copy. But when Arrol points out that he's already mastered techniques like twin slice and shadow step, she falls silent, slightly impressed. They head to the training grounds, where Arrol asks to try her massive sword. Rihanna hesitates, thinking he won't be able to lift it, but to her shock, he draws it effortlessly. Arrol grins, explaining that his strength comes from endless hours of training, and he's confident he can handle learning her technique. Finally, recognizing his determination, Rihanna agrees to train him, but warns that she won't be holding back. When Arrol compliments her as a powerful woman from his homeland, she blushes again before raising her sword to begin. Their spar is interrupted as Lilia bursts into the room, tears welling in her eyes. Panicking, she announces their first opponent, the legendary Black Blade Guild, the strongest team in the entire city. Knowing that their opponent's leader, George, is a ruthless and arrogant man, Lilia expects him to crush them without hesitation. Still, she refuses to give in to fate and focuses on preparing the team for battle. Later, when she walks in on Rihanna mercilessly striking Arrol during training, Lilia mistakes it for a heated argument caused by poor teamwork. Rihanna quickly explains that it's just part of their special training routine, but Lilia can't shake the feeling that she's venting her frustrations on him. Panting and sore, Arrol eventually stands up, complaining that he's starving. Lilia just tells him to drink some holy water first before eating. Days pass, and the long-awaited tournament finally begins. Arrol is amazed by the massive coliseum filled with cheering spectators. Around him, people whisper excitedly about the upcoming match between Dragonfang and Black Blade. Most of the crowd assumes the weaker guild doesn't stand a chance, placing their bets on Black Blade instead. Lilia's temper flares at their comments, but Rihanna quickly pulls her back before she causes a scene. When Arrol learns about the betting pools, he's surprised, and Lilia can't help but grin mischievously when she sees their odds are 20-1. Arrol marvels at the numbers, but Lilia snaps, reminding him that those odds exist because everyone expects them to lose. Still, she sees an opportunity. If they can pull off an impossible win, the payout will be huge. Since they're already drowning in debt, she reveals she's mortgaged her house and bet all of their savings on Dragonfang. Rihanna nearly faints, saying that the odds of winning are almost zero, but Lilia insists they have nothing left to lose. Just then, George approaches, smug as ever, complimenting Lilia for her dedication to her father's guild. When he brings up the classless hero she recruited, Lilia immediately realizes he's mocking her. Pretending to sound sympathetic, George claims it's sad to see her guild's downfall. Then, with a grin, he admits that he personally arranged the matchup so the crowd could watch the old strongest guild clash with the new one. He even tells her she should thank him for giving her a chance to make money off the bets, before laughing, confident that her team will never defeat his A-ranked swordsman. Furious, Lilia vows they'll win no matter what, but George just smirks and walks away. Arrol, watching him go, remarks how George hides his insults behind fake kindness. Soon, the stadium roars with excitement as the announcer hypes up the start of the tournament. Arrol notices that George himself won't be fighting and assumes maybe the man is showing mercy. But Lilia reminds him that every single member of Black Blade is A-ranked. There's no mercy coming their way. Rihanna agrees, saying they'll need everything they've got just to stay alive. Despite the tension, Arrol can't help but feel thrilled at the chance to face stronger opponents. Then the announcer's voice echoes through the arena, declaring the first match: Black Blade's Geo versus Dragonfang's classless Arrol. As Arrol steps into the arena, the crowd murmurs and laughs, wondering why Dragonfang would send in a classless nobody to start the fight. Geo, unimpressed, calls the match a waste of time. The announcer signals the start, and in an instant, Geo teleports right in front of Arrol and drives his spear straight into him. Lilia instantly worries for Arrol when Geo's attack connects, but Rihanna calmly reminds her that what he hit was just a shadow. As the shadow fades away, Geo's smug grin starts to crack. He spins around and thrusts his spear into another figure behind him, only to realize it's yet another illusion. Confused, Gio looks up to see two more Arrols standing in the arena. Smirking, he decides to wipe them out with his blink dash skill, but just as he's about to strike, a third shadow appears behind him. The three clones rush in from every direction, and although Gio manages to destroy them, the real Arrol suddenly appears right beneath him, landing a clean, devastating blow that ends the match in an instant. As Gio collapses, stunned, he mutters in disbelief. How could Arrol create three shadows at once? Arrol just chuckles and says, "My mom can summon 5 of them without even breaking a sweat." The announcer quickly declares Arrol the victor, and the entire arena erupts in thunderous applause. Lilia jumps up in excitement, cheering proudly, while Rihanna can barely believe what she's seen. Arrol just took down an A-rank swordsman like it was nothing. While the medics carry Gio off the field, Arrol reflects that he still needs more practice before he can fully master Gio's critical strike technique. The audience, meanwhile, is in shock that a so-called classless swordsman could defeat ranked fighters so effortlessly. George watches silently, his confident grin fading, as the next match begins. The following Blackblade fighter charges forward, slashing furiously, but Arrol blocks each blow with ease before countering with a twin slice, finishing the duel in seconds. Another match begins, this time against a dagger wielder who relies on close combat. But before the man even reacts, Arrol appears behind him like a phantom and knocks him out cold. Even his teammates are stunned. 3 victories in a row. Rihanna asks Lilia why she isn't entering the fray, but Lilia admits there's no point. She wouldn't stand a chance. Instead, she decides to cheer on their rising star. Together, the two watch as Arrol faces his 4th opponent, a heavily armored shield bearer. The battle begins, and Arrol quickly realizes that breaking through his opponent's defense won't be easy. He compliments the man's skill and says he'll need to wear him down gradually. The shield bearer scoffs, claiming a classless hero shouldn't even be able to last this long. Arrol fires back, saying his strength comes from years of relentless training, not from having a class. The man laughs, insisting that hard work alone can't rival divine blessings. Suddenly, he feints with his sword and charges with his shield, but Arrol predicts the move using his newly learned foresight skill, disarming him instantly. Shocked, the shield bearer realizes Arrol must have copied the move from a previous match. Arrol admits he's still far from mastering it, but he can replicate what he's seen in battle. Using a counter kick, he sends his opponent flying, then picks up the fallen shield to finish the fight with a perfect counter shield strike. The announcer raises her voice, "That's Arrol's 4th consecutive win." The crowd goes wild, now doubting if he's even truly classless. Tournament officials demand proof, so Arrol calmly hands over his class card. The announcer inserts it into the crystal orb, and silence falls as the orb confirms he's legitimately classless. George begins to sweat as pressure mounts. Even Rihanna starts to believe they might actually win. Lilia, on the other hand, is frustrated. If she'd known Arrol was this strong earlier, she would have sold her family heirlooms to bet even more on them. Rihanna is amazed at how far he's come, wondering what kind of training he went through over the last 5 years. Meanwhile, Lilia starts fantasizing about marrying him, convinced that no matter what happens to the guild, she can rebuild it if he's by her side. Her dark aura sends chills down Arrol's spine. Finally, the announcer introduces Blackblade's final swordsman, Master Masamune. Arrol notices the man wields a katana, and Rihanna recognizes the rare samurai class. Lilia realizes this must be the guild's ace, a fighter who's never revealed his skills in public. As the match begins, Masamune calmly grips his sword, radiating an overwhelming presence. Arrol feels the pressure immediately. Seeing his hesitation, Masamune smirks and warns him that the moment he steps closer will be his last. He's waiting to unleash his ultimate technique. Arrol smiles and starts walking toward him anyway. "We can't just stand around like trees," he says. "I want to see what you've really got." Masamune chuckles. "Then don't blink. You won't even see my blade move." But Arrol keeps advancing, confident in his own speed. He notices Masamune's sword remains in its sheath, realizing the samurai plans to end the fight in one perfect strike. Arrol considers using his shadows, but decides against it. Masamune's focus is too sharp to be fooled. They face each other, unmoving. One blow will decide everything. As Arrol takes his final step, Masamune's blade flashes like lightning, but Arrol vanishes right before the strike lands. Shocked, Masamune spins around, only to hear Arrol's calm voice behind him. "You're fast," he says, "but my master was even faster." He then unleashes Piercing Tempest, a devastating technique that overwhelms Masamune and sends him crashing to the ground. That night, when they returned to the guild house, the group wasted no time kicking off a celebration filled with drinks and laughter. Arrol was still taken aback by the fact that Lillian was actually old enough to drink, despite her petite appearance, but she proudly insisted that she was a grown woman. Lillian couldn't stop marveling at Arrol's strength. The fact that he had managed to defeat 5 A-ranked swordsmen from the top guild in the country, all by himself, left her speechless. Realizing his potential, she decided that winning his heart could be her way out of poverty and an opportunity for a better life. Trying her luck, Lillian boldly proposed marriage, claiming she could satisfy all his desires. But Arrol, ever the composed and independent man, refused without hesitation, saying he'd rather be with someone like Ray instead. Ray's face flushed instantly as she shot up from her chair, scolding Arrol for saying such things just to turn Lillian down. But Arrol was completely serious. When he asked why she thought he was joking, Ray reminded him of how he once called her a man during their childhood sparring match. She added that people often told her she lacked any feminine charm. Arrol, however, disagreed, teasingly pointing out that he could clearly see her charms right in front of him. Lillian quickly realized that Ray was completely unaware of her own appeal and didn't consider her a real rival. Confidently, Lillian leaned closer, placing a hand on Arrol's leg, and offered to help him relax after his exhausting day, hinting that he should meet her in her room. Embarrassed, Ray blurted out for Lillian to stop saying strange things, but Lillian only smiled, claiming it was an innocent offer to give him a well-earned massage. Unexpectedly, Arrol replied that he'd prefer a massage from Ray instead. His version of a massage, however, turned out to be a rigorous sparring session on the training grounds, where Ray pummeled him while he practiced her reinforcement magic techniques. From the balcony, Lillian sighed, wondering if Arrol had any clue what a real massage even was. Their noisy training eventually woke Ray's father, who stumbled down the stairs, still hungover and irritated. Grumbling, he complained that they didn't need to vent their frustration over losing the tournament in the middle of the night. Ray quickly corrected him, saying they had actually won, and not just any match, but against the strongest guild in the kingdom. Her father's eyes widened, but he assumed their opponents were just low-ranked rookies. Lillian quickly corrected him, revealing that they were all top-tier A-ranked fighters, and that Arrol had defeated every single one on his own. That revelation instantly sobered him up as he stared at the battered young man, astonished by his strength. Lillian proudly mentioned that she had made several bets on the match, and thanks to Arrol's flawless victory, she'd won big, enough to clear their debts and fund the guild's expenses for a while. But her father wasn't convinced. He warned her not to get too excited, saying that if Arrol truly was that powerful, bigger and richer guilds would soon try to recruit him. Lillian brushed off his concern, confidently declaring that she planned to marry Arrol anyway, meaning he would stay with them forever. Arrol, however, immediately denied having any such intentions, turning to her father and bluntly saying that while Lillian might be a bit stubborn, at least she wasn't a quitter. The jab was clearly aimed at Ray's father, who glared at Arrol with growing irritation. Arrol, still oblivious to the tension in the air, told Ray's father that instead of sulking, he should act his age and put his remaining hand to good use. After all, he could still wield a sword. That struck a nerve. Without hesitation, Ray's father grabbed Arrol by the collar, warning him not to speak about things he didn't understand. He growled that a dual-wielding swordsman who can no longer wield 2 blades is nothing but a waste of space. Unfazed, Arrol calmly disagreed, explaining that even as a classless swordsman, he continued to train, fight, and strive to improve every day. That remark made the older man shove him aside before storming upstairs in silence. Ray and Lillian rushed to Arrol's side, asking if he was okay. Lillian quickly apologized for her father's outburst, but thanked Arrol for standing up to him. Arrol brushed it off, saying that even after losing his arm, the man was still incredibly powerful, a true waste of talent if he chose not to fight again. Inwardly, Arrol made a vow to motivate Rod, Ray's father, to pick up his swords once more and reclaim his strength. Hearing that Arrol wanted to train and learn new techniques, Lillian suggested exploring some of the nearby dungeons. Arrol had no idea what she was talking about, so Ray explained that dungeons were underground labyrinths, crawling with hundreds of monsters and packed with traps. Dangerous, but perfect for gaining experience and developing new skills for the upcoming Sword God Cup. When Arrol asked what that was, Ray clarified that the Sword God Cup was an annual tournament where the strongest swordsmen in the kingdom competed to prove who was the absolute best. Excited, Lillian pulled out a registration form and told Arrol to sign up, but to everyone's shock, he tore it in half. Ray stared in disbelief, asking if he didn't want to enter the contest, but Arrol replied that Lillian had tried to trick him. The paper wasn't a tournament form at all, but a marriage certificate. Lillian laughed nervously, admitting she was just testing the waters. Fed up, Arrol put her in a light chokehold to teach her a lesson before letting her go. The next morning, Arrol woke up to find Lillian attempting to sneak into his bed, but he quickly evaded her and tied her to the bedpost before leaving for the day. Later, the group headed for the dungeon together. Lillian explained how teleportation circles worked. Adventurers could travel to any dungeon floor they'd already cleared, but not to new ones. She bragged that she'd reached level 12, while Ray had made it as far as level 14. Arrol immediately wanted to accompany Ray to that deeper level, but Lillian explained it wasn't possible unless he'd physically been there before. Disappointed, Arrol agreed to take Lillian's shortcut route to reach the lower floors faster. She saw another opportunity to get him alone, suggesting that Ray continue her solo run since Arrol only needed one guide, but Arrol saw through her plan and insisted that Ray come along too. As soon as they entered the first floor, 2 armored knights attacked. Arrol drew his blade and charged one while Ray took the other. He quickly noticed how shockingly fast the knights were despite their heavy armor. Using his dash step, he decapitated one, only to realize that the armor was hollow, animated by the dungeon's mana. The headless knight continued to fight. Ray warned that the enchanted suits felt no pain and had no real weak points. Thinking quickly, Arrol went for the legs instead, slicing through the joints and bringing the armor crashing down. Ray finished her opponent as well, noting that they'd soon regenerate, so they needed to keep moving. Before heading deeper, Arrol asked Lillian about her combat class. She proudly declared herself a fencer and offered to train him anytime, on the battlefield or in bed. Arrol simply ignored her advances and pressed onward. When they reached the next door, faint cries for help echoed from the other side. Inside, they found a man kneeling in a pool of blood, begging for aid. Ray suggested taking him to safety, but he refused, saying his companions were still trapped deeper inside after a booby trap went off. He pleaded with them to help rescue his friends. Lillian, ever opportunistic, demanded payment first. To her surprise, the man handed her a hefty sum of gold, claiming it came from gambling winnings. But Arrol felt something was off. From his experience, someone who had lost that much blood shouldn't even be standing, much less walking. Quietly, he realized that the blood and wounds were fake, but kept it to himself, curious about where this would lead. The man guided them to a hidden chamber where a trail of blood led to a puddle in the center and a single gold coin glinting on the floor. As soon as Lillian spotted the gold coin glimmering on the ground, her greed got the better of her. She reached out to grab it, but the moment her fingers brushed it, a glowing teleportation circle lit up beneath them. Ray instantly realized what was happening. It was a trap. The injured man smirked and admitted that he'd been paid handsomely to lure them there. But before he could celebrate, his grin faded. The teleportation spell dragged him along as well. They reappeared in an unfamiliar part of the dungeon, one that even Ray didn't recognize. It was deeper than the 14th floor, a place that shouldn't have existed. Strangely, there were no monsters in sight, only an eerie silence. The man who had played the victim was trembling uncontrollably, muttering that this was supposed to be the final floor, where the legendary sword god resided. His voice cracked with fear. Moments later, a figure clad in radiant, rainbow-tinted armor materialized before them. Lillian laughed it off, insisting that the sword god was nothing more than a myth. But Arrol could sense the overwhelming power radiating from the knight, and knew instantly that they were in serious danger. Without hesitation, Arrol shoved Lillian out of the way just as the sword god released a devastating slash from midair. The sheer force of the attack shattered the surrounding dungeon walls. The knight didn't stop there. In a blur, he charged straight at Arrol. Acting on instinct, Arrol raised his sword just in time to block the blow. The impact sent him crashing into the wall, but thanks to the reinforcement magic Ray had taught him, he survived the hit. Determined, Arrol countered with a swift attack, but the knight was impossibly fast, dodging with advanced techniques that left after images in his wake. Instead of panicking, Arrol grinned. Perfect, he thought. This is the kind of challenge I've been waiting for. Channeling his energy, Arrol used the same divine step technique to close the distance and launched a flurry of strikes. The knight blocked every blow, but was forced back. In response, the armored figure unleashed a powerful gravity spell, pinning everyone else to the ground. But Arrol stood firm. He had trained under similar pressure before. When his mother used to spar with him as a child, he could barely stay on his feet. This time, however, he was ready. Spotting the gold coin glowing faintly in his hand, Arrol realized it wasn't ordinary. He threw it forward, and the coin absorbed the magic in the air, nullifying the gravity spell. Seizing the opening, Arrol unleashed one of his strongest techniques, Infinite Break. The attack tore through the sword god's armor, shattering it into countless pieces. The once unstoppable knight dissolved into glowing fragments, leaving the group speechless. After healing with some holy water, Arrol and the others used a teleportation spell to return safely to the surface. Later that night, Ray's father, Rod, was drinking alone at the bar when he overheard three adventurers bragging about tricking the new members of the Dragonfang Guild into a trap, the same one Arrol and the others had fallen into. Enraged, Rod stormed over and smashed their table with a single punch, demanding they confess everything. Before they could respond, a man named Gorge interrupted, mocking Rod and calling him a useless drunk. At that moment, Rod realized the setup had been orchestrated by Gorge himself, which meant his daughter might already be dead. Desperate and furious, Rod lunged at him but was effortlessly thrown aside. Collapsed on the floor, Rod could only curse his own weakness and pray for his daughter's safety. But then a familiar voice came from the doorway. He looked up to see Lillian, Arrol, and Ray walking into the tavern, chatting casually about how hungry they were. Overcome with relief, Rod rushed forward and hugged Lillian tightly, thanking the heavens that she was alive. Ray confronted Gorge, saying they had already extracted the truth from his accomplices, that he was the one who ordered the trap. But, like any corrupt schemer, Gorge denied everything, saying everyone in a dungeon was responsible for their own survival. Arrol nodded slightly, admitting that technically, it wasn't wrong, though it was a coward's excuse. Rod warned Gorge that he wouldn't get away with it, but the man only sneered, calling Rod a washed-up drunk and walking away without a care. Arrol sighed, watching him leave, wondering what other challenges awaited them next. And that's where this episode ends. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more adventures.